Are we live?
La TV si è sconnessa, non so come mai. Okay.
Devo dire quella cosa che dicono tutti, il bello della diretta. So while we're waiting...
Tu hai fatto partire? Ok, ok, adesso lo vedo.
So, welcome everyone in Munich. I'm Maria Chiara, I'm the host of CreativeMornings Milano. With us, there will be of Munich with us, and a speaker from Munich. We also have two speakers from Milano, actually one in Milano and one in London, right, Stefano? This collaboration has been super important, but I want to start really shortly and say what I really like. So the etymology of the theme of this month. The November theme is truth, and it comes from an ancient Germanic root that means firm and solid. So what has definitely been solid in this collaboration is the work we all have done together to create this event. And I think this is the best definition for us of truth, the truth of our community. So I just want to thank you all for being here, people in Munich for being there, and all the teams that worked to create this event again. So that with our community and exchange our ideas every day with this feeling in this mood. So being firm and solid in our truth. Thank you for being here.
Paola?
Paola? Hi, Paola.
C'è un po' il delay.
Hi, Paola.
Okay, hi. Thanks everyone for being here today. As I said before, we are doing a special collaboration with CreativeMornings Milan. You heard them already. My name is Paola. I'm the host of CreativeMornings Munich. And, we did like a special visual, for today. So, but normally we have this one. So yeah, every month we are doing these meetups, these events to gather the creative community and listen to an inspiring talk. This is thanks not only to the volunteers that are in Munich, but also in Milan, but also thanks to the sponsors. Globally, we have MailChimp. And today we have a very special sponsor that is Entity Data Tangity, that is not only the sponsor here in Munich, but also in Milan. So let's say thank you. And because today we have three speakers, we should start very quickly. So Stephanie, please introduce our great speaker, Maria. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. So we're really happy to have Maria Fröhlich here. Maria is a design researcher at Idea Studios. I'm sure a lot of you know DDU. Maria, is really interested in responsible design, holistic design, co-creation, and I think this kind of multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary interest that she has makes her, a really great person to talk about.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I want to talk a little bit today about how to create and design products and services that are more truthful. Because as you all know, the topic of Creative Mornings in November is truth. And it's a really interesting time to think and talk about truth. Because when we look outside into the world, sometimes it feels like it can be quite hard to find truth, and my truth can be entirely different to your truth, depending on the information that we have. And did you know that in 2016, Word of the Year by Oxford Dictionaries was actually post-truth, because they've seen a spike in frequency of using that word, especially in the context of the EU referendum in the United Kingdom, but also in the presidential election in the United States. But not only in the world of politics. I mean, if you think about all those greenwashing incidents, about all those scandals, it's pretty clear that a lot of trust is broken, not only with politics, it's with individual people, with services, products, with companies. And I was really curious to think a little bit about our role and responsibility in building and rebuilding trust. And when I say we, I mean all the people in the creative industry who create, design, and communicate. Because eventually when we design something, we want to build a relationship with the user or with the customer. And any meaningful relationship is built on trust. So I don't know about you, but since I started working in the field of design, almost in any project, at some point, the question of credibility, loyalty, or trust came up. And design really is a craft with quite a big amount of power, with the power to choose and the power to influence and the power to change how people perceive the truth. And with that, we also have the responsibility to make really good decisions on what we think is even worthy to be trusted. So I think we do have to do our homework and understand the context better to make really good decisions, because we are kind of gatekeepers to decide on what we want to bring to the world and what we decide to not bring to the world. And that may sound easy, but let me give you a few examples. So if you are, for example, a photographer, you have a great amount of power to choose who is in your picture, how are you portraying them, but maybe also who is not in there, who are you excluding, and what are you communicating with that? If you're working in user experience, you have a great amount of power to choose what's most visible, and with that very directly influence how people behave. If you're, for example, an industrial designer, you have a great amount of power to make something accessible to someone, but maybe not accessible to someone else. And that could be because of the form of something, but also by, for example, the material that you choose. And in that way, making a product more expensive and maybe accessible to someone, but not someone else. And of course, the choice of material also impacts all these people that are part of the respective supply chain. So at this point, I just want to mention that I'm not an expert of designing for trust, but since I started working, I've worked across many different disciplines. I have a background in industrial design and visual communication, and I've worked as a design researcher and spatial designer. And I have the pleasure to be surrounded by a lot of thoughtful people at IDEO and a culture that encourages these discussions. And that really helped me to build my opinion and I guess always rebuild it again. So I would like to share a couple of my experiences today, and more importantly, a couple of questions that have helped me to take small steps. Yeah, when I started studying design, I definitely thought I could make the world a better place. I thought I could make things that are making people's lives more easy, more convenient, maybe more sustainable. And I definitely saw design as the solution to many problems. And I think a few years down the line, I'm not so sure anymore. I think we're definitely also part of the problem. And I think Mike Montero describes it really nicely in his book, Ruined by Design, that many things in our world are exactly like they're designed. They're working exactly like they were supposed to be designed. And still they have quite a bad impact. And I'm not saying that designers are evil or they want to destroy the planet, but clearly something between the intention when something was designed and the outcome is in many, many cases quite broken. And I think that oftentimes starts with even asking the wrong questions, especially in the beginning when I started working. Many times the briefings and questions sounded something like, hey, we have a really cool technology. How can we sell this to people? Or, hey, there's a problem that maybe some people don't even know yet that they have it, but we have a solution, and how can we sell this to people? And I recently came across this really nice visualization by Filippo Cutica, who is an artist, futurist, and designer who works in responsible innovation and critical speculation. And he visualized what he called the rabbit hole of critical inquiry, where you can see in the top levels, it's along the lines of what I just talked about. Surface level, it's like, cool, there's new robots, what can we do with that? Or very problem oriented of, okay, I have maybe this problem of assembling cars and robots can do that, great. But then as you go deeper, there's the level of critical inquiry where you think about, okay, maybe robots take away jobs and what kind of unintended implications does that have? Or even more deeper on a philosophical level, what if they could do anything? And oftentimes design briefings and design questions that we start with are very much stuck in those top 2 levels. But I do think that we have the mandate to at least try to think a little bit more critically and go deeper. And if we assume that we all want to do that, we want to critically engage and we want to do good, the question is, what's kind of hindering us? So from your experience, what are the barriers to successfully implement a culture of responsible design? And I believe we have a little bit of time later to talk about that. And I would love to hear some of your experiences and thoughts. But before, I would like to share kind of 3 moments where I encountered a lot of these barriers. But I would like to flip them into questions that hopefully open opportunities for us to design more responsibly. And those 3 questions are: how do we define our vision and goals? How do we measure the success on getting there? And how do we actually design? So let's start with, how do we define our vision and goals? Usually, the vision and goals are defined by a very small group of people at the top of an organization. And I love this quote by Ruha Benjamin, who is a sociologist and works at the intersection of race, justice, and technology. And she says most people are forced to live in someone else's imagination. And that imagination might be really nice and really convenient for that small group of people, but oftentimes it also reinforces the flawed systems that we are all operating in and living in. So the push to all of us would be, how can we have a more diverse group of people actually challenging these goals and provoking new thinking? And how can we all step into that conversation and bring our own input, but also invite many others to the table to shape more diverse goals and visions? Secondly, how do we measure the success in getting there? So usually we build what we can measure, and what we build directly shapes the world around us. And what we usually measure are things like money, sales, clicks, usually something that's a very clear quantity. And Donella Meadows, environmental scientist that probably many of you know for her amazing work in systems thinking, said, pay attention to what is important and not just what's quantifiable. So she talked about how our world is obsessed with numbers, and that kind of makes us feel that what is measurable is more important than what's not measurable, which, if you think about it, means that quantity is more important than quality. And if we keep on motivating ourselves and rating ourselves and rewarding ourselves based on our ability to produce quantity, the outcome will always be quantity. And he also really nicely says that if you then take a moment and look around, you can decide for yourself if you think that quantity or quality is the outstanding characteristic of the world that we live in. So again, I think it would be quite an interesting and powerful design challenge to think about how we can align our KPIs with our values and our underlying belief systems, and how powerful would that be if we all step into that conversation, not shy away from it. And last but not least, how do we design? So probably many of you know this book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about those 2 systems of thinking. System 1 level thinking being very fast, very effortless, and it relies on our instinct and our experience. System 2 thinking being a lot slower, requiring a lot more effort, and it's that type of thinking that's logical and very conscious. And what happens a lot in our design world is that we have very short amount of times for things, which naturally puts us into system 1 thinking, where our brain relies on a lot of biases and shortcuts and is in the way of engaging more critically. And the second thing that can be dangerous is to codify ethics, because that can instill a checklist approach. If I have my checklist of those are the 5 things that I need to do to be responsible, it also hinders me to actually critically engage in the topic and think about it. So I think most importantly, having that space and time to actually critically engage with what we're designing is really important. And now I spoke a little bit about what could help us to define or decide what's even worthy to be trusted. And I would just like to take a couple of minutes to now talk about how to actually maybe design trust. So how can we, if we make a decision of, I think that's really worthy to be trusted, how do we design it in a way that feels trustworthy? And there's some great work by Frances Frey, who is a professor at the Harvard School of Business. And she has done a big amount of work in the field of trust building. And she says, actually, trust is quite well understood. It consists of these three components: logic, authenticity, and empathy. And I would briefly like to look at what this means for the design process. So first of all, people trust you if they believe that you're logic. It's kind of like, I believe that you can do this and your reasoning is sound. And I think that's where I spent most of my university time at. And it's very important to, on a logical level, understand, okay, what's maybe the best choice of a material or of a color or of a typography, whatever it is. But then later in life, in my role at IDEO, I added those other components a lot more, the authenticity and empathy. So secondly, people will trust you if they feel like you're authentic. So I feel like I'm getting access to the real you. And at IDEO, we do something that we call human-centered design, which essentially is taking a lot of time to really trying to understand humans. And that's not only true for users and customers, but also of people on the inside of organizations that we work for. So we take lots of time to really understand the values, the goals, the hopes and fears maybe of the organization we work for, but also of individuals in that organization. And that helps to really design something that feels a lot more authentic and true to the client. And last but not least, people will trust you if they feel that you're empathetic. So that's kind of like, I believe that you care actually about me and my success. And that's really, I think, the field where I spent most of my recent years working in as a design researcher. So we use design research to get really close to people, trying to understand their needs, spending lots of time with them, talking with them, and really trying to get at the core. And I think that's been the most powerful addition to my design process in the recent years, because it really creates something that not only feels empathetic, but really tries to be empathetic. And with that, just to quickly recap those 3 questions that hopefully can help us to think more critically about the whole process. So how do we define our vision and goals? How do we measure success? And how do we actually design? And again, later I would love to hear your thoughts on your experiences. What are the biggest barriers in implementing a culture responsible design? But for now, thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Maria. So this is how it's gonna we're gonna continue. We're gonna stream the 2 speakers from Milan, and then at the end we're gonna have the Q&A. Okay, so please stay with us. Let me just change the computer, and we are back. Stop screen sharing. Yeah.
Hi. So thank you for your speech. So I hope we can make it basis for a dialogue in the latest minutes. Quickly, both our speakers are multi-potential experts, creative, and also fascinating human beings. So I'm really happy, and the Milan community is super happy to have them here. Stefano Marrone, an expert in visual storytelling on all media, partner at Unit 9 and Book on a Tree. Also on the list of Forbes 30 under 30. Leslie Fisher is a video producer for Lateral Films. She's over there. And she produced many kind of works and also a musician. So I invite you to follow both of them on their social profiles and see what they're up to. And now let's listen to them. So Stefano and then Leslie, or if you want to talk together, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Hopefully, yes, I see the thumbs up. Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Italian from London, talking to you. It's much appreciated. I'm conscious of time, so I'm gonna, try to speed it up. I don't have any slides because I imagine that it would have been tricky to, see the slides and not me in presence. So I want to take a slightly, I would say, different point of view and talking a little bit about what truth means when you have a project that is a communication project or in the, say, marketing space mainly and comms that involves a lot of actors and is like a big brand project. Because I remember when I first started working in this fantastic field, that my ambition was, wow, it would be something incredible to make a project for a big brand, and it would be so exciting and incredibly interesting. And then what happens is that I started working quite young in Le Burnett in Milan for an agency called B-Cube. And our first clients were BMW Motorrad, Mini Cooper, Heineken, Coca-Cola, dream clients. And I was incredibly excited about it. And then you start sort of seeing these cracks about the projects that are like, this is not exactly what I expected. There are many more moving parts. Then I was lucky enough to found and sold my own agency studio called Nucco. And then that allowed me to work with clients like Google, JP Morgan, with Bayer, with Nike. So if we think a little bit about these big brand campaigns, I am always baffled by the great deal of really bad storytelling and especially bad brand marketing campaigns out there. And I was, especially early in my career, thinking, how can we not do better than this? As a freelancer and then working in agency. And the reality is that, yes, we can do better than this, but we also, I would say, not appreciate the incredible sort of miracle that is when something very good comes out there and how that is the mix of many different circumstances and how keeping the integrity of a creative idea, the truth of that idea, is something that is way more layered than we think. So after around 15 years in this industry, there is an aphorism by Oscar Wilde that now I sort of live by, that is that truth is rarely pure and never simple. That such thing as a pure and simple truth doesn't necessarily exist. And that's why I have to say that, like everything becomes a buzzword at a certain point. It was storytelling, now is the Web3 related terms. I think that it's very tricky to deal with the word authenticity nowadays without calling mixed feelings about it. But when we think about, at the end of the day, most of us live in a system where ultimately it works within the current economic system. Marketing and comms within that is this very weird overlapping of, there is business, of course, somebody's paying for stuff, there is craft, and then sometimes there is art that comes out of that. And in this, there are many truths that are operating at the same time. So if we take a look at not a small project where you're just working with somebody to make their idea true, but like a big brand campaign, let's take a look at the actors that are involved. There is a commissioning department in a brand, somebody that has been told to do something and they have to do it. There is often a media agency or integrated agency that is overseeing everything. There is a creative agency or a creative department. There is the production house, the people hands-on that make the stuff. And I think that a lot of you are part of this craft layer that are ultimately the people that do things. And then there is the brand that is more of an abstract entity that is perceived by a wider audience. If you want, is the brand in the collective conscience of people. And each one of these actors as a truth, and this truth is exists at the same time. So what I kind of want to do now in the rest of my talk is to list a little bit these truths, and what I've seen are, in a way, the competing points of view of these people. First of all, there is the truth of your idea, of your concept. As a creative, you're doing something, and how do you make sure that you keep this nugget of creative truth regardless of the aim of the campaign? If you want the soul of your idea, a little bit of artistic integrity, if such a thing can be kept nowadays. And I think that this is the part where most fresh creatives, young creatives care about. It's all about the truth of my creative idea. And for example, we shouldn't change this specific color or this design because then my ideas gets compromised around it. And I think that is particularly something that gets crumbled over and over again against the different truths that come and sort of like impose their importance on things, which is a pity, but is also something that very often as creative, we don't zoom out to see what else is happening and generate frustration, And then there is the truth of the campaign objectives. Ultimately, as has been mentioned already, we're here to try to either somewhat sell something or let people take an action to insight. So the question is, can we or do we sacrifice the integrity of our idea, of our truth, of our story for a call to action of some type? I think it's quite interesting when you can see that detachment when you have at the end of a piece of creative content, something that is a call to action that says, buy, engage, click on this, and then a piece of storytelling that has nothing to do with it. And that is when these two objectives, these two truths have not aligned. Then there is something that people I think, as creatives, are forced to think about at a certain point in their career, but is not there all the time. That is the truth of your agency, agency, production studio. And that, yes, there is a budget. There is something we're very good at doing. Let's say that we're an event agency or we're a content agency. And then there is what this story, this campaign, or the client needs that is beyond our expertise. I'm going to make you an example. For example, I know that the client would be better off by spending a little bit more money in content instead of doing this big event, but we're an event agency. So do I keep true to what is our core, regardless of an higher need that is out there, keeping that level of authenticity? And if you want a little bit of intellectual honesty, is quite tricky, because you might lose your commission or so on. And then there is the truth of the brand or the client department involved. And I think this is one of the truths that very often is unseen by many of us. At the end of the day, if you are lucky or unlucky enough to put your head inside a brand and see how their departments are organized, you can see that you're not commissioned by, say, X brand by Coca-Cola or Nike. You're commissioned by a specific department within Nike that is telling you to do something, and ultimately who are paying for it. And for example, if we get some money from the PR team, but this would be a great campaign for the digital boost and SEO, it sort of doesn't matter. We're there to serve the objectives of the PR team and the people in that specific team. So that's a very tricky thing, because ultimately you think you're serving this abstract brand, but it's not true. You're serving the specific people in the specific department that have asked you to do something. And the typical, I would say, very positive thinking, but ultimately naive idea is then to go to somebody and say, why don't we merge these budgets that you have? Why don't you make your PR team work together with your SEO team, and we can do something beautiful together? In my experience, this depends incredibly on how organizations are made and organizational design. And unless you have an organization that is prone and supports collaboration, there's nothing you can do about that. And you want to keep the team that is actually working with you happy, rather than necessarily the brand there. And then there is this interesting thing about the truth of the brand itself, and the brand is something that it's very difficult, especially when you're working with big brands, to establish the ownership, who owns it. In a sense, the audience owns it as much as the people that work in the brand. And if we are creating something new, something that is quite different, are we betraying that brand? what happens if we go just slightly out of the branding guidelines, and in a way, because branding guidelines are, a decision made by somebody, some designer somewhere, are those guidelines through themselves to what we perceive the brand as being? I think there are some wonderful examples of brand that, in a way, despite the willingness of who owns them, have been then changed and warped by their audience. And is that true, being to be respected? Does it need to be respected, or do you get somebody to rein it back in? I find, the case study of Burberry quite interesting, how they re-owned the brand from what it was in the early 90s. So just to conclude out of this, I want to make it brief. I'm going to share with you a little bit of unpopular opinions, I think, about truth in this land where I think we call for authenticity a lot without necessarily explaining what it is. And there is no one truth, and there are things that are more false than others. That's definitely the case. And in all of this competing truths, you can still be a storyteller, you can still have integrity, even with all these compromises. But it's also equally true that every good campaign, as I said before, is a miracle of this getting together of circumstances and compromise. And not even get me started on things like movies. It's very, very difficult to get something out there in the cinema. This idea of black and white and inspirational stories that we hear about, I think are rather... it's something that you do with the hindsight, where you can reconstruct something and say, oh, it has gone perfectly well. Here is our case study, and I'm telling you how it has gone like this, like this, like this, and like this. And it's very easy to create a success story with hindsight. The reality is that there are so many hurdles that you jump through, and that we should not really look for this idea of simplistic truth, but our world is layered. So looking for simple answers in a complex world, I think, is a very naive thing to do that ultimately leads to all sorts of mistakes. And I have to say that people that want to keep that level of idea of purity in ideas without the consideration of all this world have a luxury. And this luxury is something that I think as the conscious designers, conscious creator, conscious creatives, we should throw away this luxury. We cannot live in a world of ignorance as bliss, where we just think about the truth of our creative idea and don't think about all the context. Because as the speaker before me was mentioning, this is how some very big mistakes happen when you're not considerate of the whole ecosystem. So for me, it's how do you find that truth balance? I came up with this idea of truth balance, that is what level of shade of gray is good for you, and embrace it for effective and good creative work. So my question for the audience to bring it home or talk about later is how do you define that? How do you define your truth balance? And how do you find that nugget of truth in all of this complexity without compromising yourself? And that's about it. Thank you so much for listening to me.
I'm Leslie. I'm a video producer. I'm really happy to be here. This is a very nice change for me to be here in the morning. So I hope I'll be interesting and not over simple. I'll go straight into it so that we can have a little bit of time to discuss all these beautiful and inspiring speeches. I wanted to show you a clip this morning, a clip of a documentary I have produced in 2017. I'm really proud of it. It was an independent production and is now touring in festivals. So if you're interested in watching the whole thing, I will gladly send you all a link. It's just to make a little bit of a introduction on the clip so you understand what you're about to watch. It was a documentary where we followed the story of Cristian Cappello. He was one of the most famous Italian travel bloggers. Unfortunately, in 2016, he lost his pregnant wife. She was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and lost his child as well. And he decided to travel the whole of Italy by foot after this tragedy. And we followed him to collect money for cystic fibrosis, which is the most common rare genetic disease in Italy. And he decided to do this in his wife's name. So the clip I'm about to show you, we are about halfway through this journey. He has been traveling 3,000 kilometers by foot by now. So he's really tired. I will not talk furthermore, just watch the clip and then we'll talk about it.
Più grande è meglio è. Aspetta. Cazzo. Ti consiglio di cambiare strada. Se posso dare un consiglio. Là, posso passare. Vai. Capito? Vuol dire. Sì, è cattivo. Quanto manca? Fai da lì. Sta. Bisogno di... Cosa hai bisogno? Un mese di vacanza. Cosa hai bisogno?
Okay. So sorry, it was a bit tragic for 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning right now. I'm sorry, but it was functional for what I wanted to explain. So this sequence is divided in 2 parts. Okay. The first part is what I would call the super real, the real part. Okay. So you can see we were very lucky to having got on camera the part where he's falling. So he was trying to cross the river, he fell down, he starts laughing there. But from that point onwards, you can see there's a shift in his feelings because he's getting more and more frustrated. He's getting angry. On the next shot, you see a blurred face. That is the director. And the director understood that he was having a moment there, so he went to talk to him. It was a very intimate moment for them, so he kept the camera rolling, but I didn't want to ruin that moment between them with the camera. That obviously, it gives you some distance between them. So he keeps the camera and he tries to get in the shot. He's all blurred, but he kept it in because that moment was really important, and he understood he was really sad and tired. Okay, so and then you see the movement of the camera that the director is actually hugging him because he's having a moment there, and that's like the best part of documentaries because that's like the real truth that you can get. You don't get as truth as that moment. But what happens next? You have the second part of the sequence. So you have him lying down on the grass, really tired, begging us to leave him there. And here you have a decision. You need to make the audience be part of that feeling. You were not there with us. You couldn't understand that moment if it was not manipulated by editing. So in the second part of the sequence, you see him lying down, and then you see a house. It's his home in northern Italy, really far away. We're on the southern point in Italy, so 3,000 kilometers away from his house. He really felt that. And the director decided to edit in this drone that goes away from his home, making him feel like really far away, and this melancholic feeling he was feeling. We are not sure he was thinking about his home in that moment. So that moment was manipulated by the director, who is the editor as well in this case. And why did he do that? It's important to edit, even a documentary, because it's the director's point of view. It was what he was feeling in that moment, and really wanted to put the audience on the same emotional level we all had. So it was a manipulation of the truth, but to create a greater truth in the director's point of view. And how did he do that? Through editing. So I hope this is not too simple, because this is the lesson, like Film School 101. It's the first thing they teach you, is a quote by Mr. Alfred Hitchcock. We all know him, okay? One of the greatest filmmakers of all time, one of my ultimate favorite directors. And he used to say this very interesting quote: "Movies are like real life, but with the boring parts cut out." Okay. So what does this mean? Whenever you watch a fiction film, so we're talking about fiction here, you don't see your protagonist going to sleep, you don't see him brushing his teeth, you don't see him eating, unless it's absolutely fundamental for the storyline. Otherwise, it would be a little bit ridiculous, right? So why am I talking about fiction film? Because documentaries, they're made just as fiction films. So you have preparations, you have screenplayers, you have editing. You don't just find the story, get your camera, and just go outside and start shooting whatever you see. So you have the same kind of preparation. And it's important not to forget this, because otherwise we are not active viewers. We're just people sitting on a sofa and watching something, believing what they are proposing to you. So Hitchcock, he made this beautiful example, which I found super easy to understand, and it really is on point. So he used to say, if you have, for example, a close-up of a person who's looking to something, you have no idea what he's looking at. There's a man looking at something. Then you can cut to a shot where a child is eating an ice cream, and cut back to him. You can do the same thing with the same shot, and you can cut to a naked girl or girl undressing. Okay? With the same shot, you will have two completely different points of view. So when you see the man watching the kid eating the ice cream, and you cut back to him, you could think he's looking at the kid with tenderness, that maybe he's his father, he's really happy to see him happy eating the ice cream. You could have all these sort of feelings. But if you put the same shot with a naked woman, and it's the same shot, incredibly, maybe he's a pervert watching a naked woman undress. Maybe he's in love with her. Maybe he's angry at her, or maybe he's looking at her with disbelief because she's so beautiful. So with the same thing, you can have two completely different truths. And this is really important to understand documentary filmmaking as well. So going back to the clip with this example, with the editing, we changed what was actually going on in that moment. We decided to change it in order for us to really pull in the audience in our truth, in what we believe, what was happening in that moment. But it's what we believed. It wasn't necessarily the real truth, but it is functional to the story. So my question for you is, can we really talk about truth in the film industry? I'm not really sure about that. So whenever they asked me to come here and talk about truth in the film industry, I was I was really worried because I didn't know, how to explain this. But I came to the point that maybe we cannot talk about truth. Maybe we could change slightly this word in the film industry, especially in the documentary film industry. Maybe we could talk about honesty instead of truth, which is kind of the same thing, but it has a spectrum which is a little bit different. So to conclude, I would just want to say that when you watch a documentary, so don't ask yourself the next time if the story that they're telling you is the truth. Maybe ask yourself if who's telling it is being honest with you. So this is the most important thing for me. Thank you very much.
Hey, where are you going?
I'm staying.
Come here.
I'm staying.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you to everyone. So I have a question.
Yes.
For the three speakers all together, and so I'm looking at you, the other speakers, and at you. So the question is, the ancient Greeks said truth as opposite to opinion. So while you were speaking, I was thinking, yeah, maybe truth is not the right word. Maybe the right word is opinion. But then you came up with honesty, which is super interesting because truth is perceived as something that has to do with the object, while honesty has to do with the subject.
Exactly.
So maybe we have to take responsibility and then become honest instead of saying, okay, there is a truth out there and it's independent from my responsibility and my honesty. So the question is opinion, truth, honesty. So what's the relationship? Do you think? I already know that you're thinking, but for everyone, what's the relationship between truth and responsibility? And I'm going.
Stefano, me?
Do you want to start? I need like 7 minutes to think about it.
It is a very difficult question, actually. I can start if you want. I agree with what Maria Cara said, that truth is a more kind of objectified term. That's why I went with honesty, because I do believe that if you, especially, I can talk for myself, I mean, if you're a filmmaker, it is important to be honest, because otherwise you're trying. I can relate with you, Stefano, because I do corporate films a lot as well. So I don't believe I don't believe you have to be artistic all the time. I truly understand what you said before. I'm with you. It's frustrating. I understand, but it is really important. So even when you do corporate films, you need to be honest with it, because you need to own what you're doing. And if you own it, you need to be honest with it, because otherwise you cannot sleep at night. So it's important for you to be honest with it. And the truth it goes in a second. It's a second step to be truthful. But it's not as important as being honest or for filmmaking as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what I find quite interesting in all of this, and I said it on my talk a little bit. I think that the thing that is difficult is to find this level of like objectivity and truth, because we are in a context where so much of it is angles, and it seems that nowadays. Especially if you take a look at social chamber of resonance, the idea that there is far more, I think, verbal and sometimes physical violence related to clashing truths, rather than if we moved it to this point of view of, this is, as you say, what I feel that I own, and this is my point of view, and I, in a way, my conscience exists and I feel honest about something, then we can talk about moving the fuzzy edge of the honesty part and keeping the core of it, and instead of having this like hard, inflexible bit, is like, no, this is the truth, period. I think that's a tricky statement in general that makes people argue, especially because I think that nowadays there is something that I clash with, that people care more about being right than exploring really what the core or the soul of something is. So I don't know if this exactly addresses your question, Maria Chiara, but I think that what we're missing is conversation about truths and where the real sort of like core of something is, and instead what we have is like just this, we are here and I'm not gonna move an inch because being seen and somebody that changes their mind is a negative aspect. So frankly speaking, I would welcome a word of opinions where people stop just claiming to have the truth, because that is in a way a more democratic, less violent word. We can talk about stuff.
Yes. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, we have to think.
yeah, totally. Where should I talk to this or?
No, just talk to the public.
Okay.
audience.
I really liked what you said, Stefano, and also in your talk, there is clearly not one truth. And I think to my value system and to my ethics, it is quite important to try to be as honest in my work as possible. But I totally agree, it's not enough even because it's one angle, it's one opinion. And I loved what you said about having a conversation where we talk more about different opinions, because having a more diverse group of people sharing opinions might get us a little bit closer to maybe a shared truth, even though that's still not the one and only truth. But it's more true to that than just my own single truth. Yeah.
Great. Let's take 3 questions from the Munich public. So who wants to start? Questions first for Maria, and if you have a question for Stefan or Leslie, should be maybe at the end. Any questions for Maria? Oh my God, it was so truthful. Everything.
That's fine as well.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the word transparency, but I was thinking about it a lot when I heard the 3 speakers, because some talk about opinions, perspectives in a way, and also someone mentioned about when you talk about truth, you're judging something, and then that's why the word transparency comes out in my mind, because it's kind of okay, you put out there trying to be clear of what you found out, but you're not making a judgment. I would like to know what's your take on that.
Yeah, totally. I like that additional word of transparency, and I think that's also what I meant a little bit with like they're as honest as possible where how I see things, but then also inviting others to do the same. But it's a lot of terms that are around it. I mean, especially transparency is something that comes up so often in also like the design world. But yeah, again, I really like to maybe even when we formulate something as being transparent and sharing, I really liked as framing it as an opinion and my point of view rather than that's the truth. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? No? Okay. Let's see if Milan has any other questions.
No, I think we are ready for the coffee. Yeah. So for now, I think thank you, everyone. Let's take a picture together.
Yes.
We are incredibly online.
And then there is Day and the TV.
Yeah,
So
stay on the streaming, please, so we can take a group picture together on this side. Put on your shoe face.
ci sono loro. Tutti più vicini.
Hey, collega.
It's so on topic that you're seeing different perspectives of the same.
Cheers. Nata, grande.
Well, thank you very much. We did it. And yeah,
Thank
please-
you.
Oh, troppo niente.
Non so quale, guarda. Guardo il lido.
Yeah, we want to talk to someone and do some networking.
Grazie Stefano.
Buona
Ciao,
giornata.
ciao a tutti.
Have a nice day.
We have that you can check in our website and newsletter. It's gonna be quite early in December on the 9th, so everyone can enjoy their Christmas holidays without